How many things do you carry in your life that no longer make sense? You may not even notice the extra weight, but it is there. It is like walking down a steep trail carrying a backpack full of rocks that you have never stopped to evaluate. The truth is that many people spend their lives accumulating patterns of behavior, beliefs, and relationships that, in practice, only serve to drag us down. And worse, we rarely have the courage to leave these things behind. Stoicism, a practical philosophy that has spanned centuries, teaches that living well means knowing how to distinguish the essential from the superfluous. It means eliminating, with courage and serenity, that which does not contribute to our purpose. But what should be left aside is not always obvious. We are accustomed to thinking that what holds us back are the great obligations or the obvious problems when, in fact, what wears us down the most are the invisible chains, those that disguise themselves as responsibilities, expectations, or even good intentions. The great Stoics such as Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius discovered something that many have not yet realized. True freedom comes from the ability to let go of what is not under our control. Letting go of the unnecessary is a silent act, but one with enormous transformative power. That is what we are going to talk about here. Things that you should eliminate from your life, without fanfare, without justification, and without regret. And why silently? Because true growth does not need external approval or validation. Most of the time, no one needs to know what you have left behind. This is something that happens internally, and often, it is precisely the fact that it is silent that makes this process so powerful. Each point we are going to address is based on principles that the Stoics applied in their daily lives to live with greater clarity and less disturbance. And the most interesting thing is that these are teachings that remain surprisingly current, even after so many centuries. Applying these concepts does not mean distancing yourself from the world, but rather relating to it in a more authentic and balanced way. You may find that some of these things have been part of your life for so long that you no longer realize their negative impact. And most importantly, you may realize that eliminating them may be the step you need to take to live with more ease and purpose. Sometimes the most powerful act someone can take is to let go. And to do this, you don't have to shout to the world about what you're letting go of. You just have to acknowledge the unnecessary weight, let go, and move on. Now, let's explore what silently needs to be eliminated from your life so that you can live with more freedom and peace. One of the most subtle traps we carry is the constant need to be understood and accepted by everyone. This sounds harmless at first glance, but the incessant search for approval is like trying to hold sand in your hands. The more you try, the more it slips through your fingers. Stoicism teaches that what is outside of our control should not govern our emotions and attitudes. Epictetus, one of the greatest names in this philosophy, made it clear that our inner peace depends solely on how we react to events, and not on the events themselves. And when you are constantly trying to justify every step you take, you are handing over your power to something you can never control: the opinions of others. This need to be understood arises from the desire for external validation. We often act with the intention of being accepted, of avoiding criticism, or of ensuring that our image remains intact in the eyes of others. But this is an impossible battle to win. Even if you explain your reasons with absolute clarity, there will always be those who choose to interpret it differently. What the Stoics propose is simple and radical. Give up trying to be understood by everyone. This does not mean being rude or ignoring others, but rather accepting that some people will never understand who you are or why you choose certain paths. And that's okay. The important thing is to be at peace with your own choices, regardless of external judgment. Practicing strategic silence is a powerful tool in this process. Whenever you feel the urge to justify yourself, ask yourself, does this person really need to understand what I'm doing? Is their opinion relevant to my progress? More often than not, you'll find yourself trying to justify your actions to people who don't really matter to you on your journey. Failing to seek this universal understanding is actually an act of courage. You're affirming that your worth doesn't depend on the recognition of others, but on the coherence between your thoughts, actions, and purpose. It's a freedom few achieve because it requires the humility to accept that not everyone will applaud your choices, and that it doesn't matter. Silently eliminating the need to be understood means stopping carrying a useless burden. When you stop trying to explain every step you take, you discover that the journey becomes lighter and more fluid. The opinions of others cease to be a constant concern and become just background noise, incapable of diverting you from your true path. And the most interesting thing? When you really don't care about being understood, you often end up being understood more genuinely by those who really matter, because these people see you for who you are and not for who you try to prove yourself to be. Now, let's talk about another burden that needs to be left behind: the mental wear and tear caused by trying to change that which simply cannot be changed. There is an uncomfortable truth that many ignore: the absurd amount of mental energy we waste trying to change that which is completely beyond our control. It's like trying to row against an unforgiving current, believing that effort alone will be enough to transform reality. Seneca, one of the great masters of Stoicism, said that it is not the weight that brings you down, but the way you carry it. This teaching is a clear reminder that the problem is not the obstacle itself, but our insistence on resisting it without discernment. Weariness with unchangeable situations is one of the main thieves of peace of mind. We insist on changing things that have already given all the signs that they will not change. Other people's attitudes, past events, circumstances that are beyond our control. The energy that could be used to grow and evolve is, in fact, wasted on battles that will never have a winner. Stoicism teaches us the practice of active acceptance, which is not resignation or giving up, but rather a clear recognition of reality. Accepting what cannot be changed is an act of emotional intelligence, because it directs your energy towards what really matters. It is choosing to face the world as it is, not as you would like it to be. And how do you know if you are wearing yourself out with something you cannot change? Do a simple exercise. Write a list of your main worries and anxieties. Then divide these worries into two categories: those you can control and those you can't. Anything that falls into the second category needs to be left behind, consciously and silently. Accepting that something is out of your control is not an act of weakness. On the contrary, it is a gesture of strength and humility. It is the recognition that the world is bigger than you and that, despite this, you can still choose how to react to it. Another essential point is that this acceptance does not need to be announced. Often what keeps these situations unchanged in our lives is precisely the attempt to justify or change them publicly. Eliminating this wear and tear in silence is choosing to preserve your own energy, without wasting words trying to prove something to anyone. Leaving behind what cannot be changed is making room for what really matters. It is transforming wasted energy into clarity and purpose. Instead of fighting the uncontrollable, you start to dedicate your strength to what can truly be transformed. Now, it's time to look at another silent burden that we often carry for too long: relationships that require constant wear and tear and never evolve. Not all relationships are meant to be part of your life forever. Some of them, in fact, become real burdens that you carry out of fear, guilt, or pure habit. It's that friendship that always demands too much and offers little in return. It's that relationship that only survives because you're always trying to save what's already been lost. A common trap is to believe that keeping everyone happy is a moral obligation. But the reality is that by trying to meet other people's expectations at all costs, you distance yourself further and further from yourself. The truth is that some relationships are not healthy, and no matter how hard you try, they never will be. Continuing to invest energy in them is like trying to water a plant that has already died. The Stoics teach us to cultivate relationships that contribute to our moral and emotional development. To do this, we need to recognize which relationships are worthwhile and which are, in practice, constant sources of wear and tear. Marcus Aurelius, for example, spoke about the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who stimulate our virtue and avoiding those who drag us down to mediocrity. Nature is an excellent example of this. A plant that does not flourish in a certain soil needs to be transplanted to another environment. There is no guilt or resentment in this process, just the search for the right place to grow. But how do you know when it is time to walk away? The signs are usually subtle but consistent. If a relationship demands more justifications than genuine understanding, if it is marked by resentment more than mutual support, it is a clear indication that something is deeply misaligned. The process of walking away does not have to be noisy or confrontational. In fact, true wisdom lies in distancing yourself silently and respectfully, without trying to justify yourself or convince others of your decision. It is a personal choice that must be made calmly and firmly. Leaving these relationships behind means allowing your time and energy to be directed towards what really matters. It means learning to protect what is most valuable to you, your inner peace. And it means understanding that the fact that you no longer carry certain people with you does not mean that you hate or despise them. It simply means that you have chosen to take care of yourself first and foremost. The freedom that comes from this act is indescribable. Your mind becomes lighter, more focused, and ready to dedicate itself to what truly adds value. It is a silent but powerful cleansing. Now let's talk about an even more subtle but equally limiting burden. The old beliefs that you hold on to without questioning, even when they no longer make sense. Few things weigh as heavily on the mind as old beliefs that have never really been questioned. They often emerge in childhood, adolescence, or at vulnerable moments in life and, out of convenience or habit, remain untouched. But these beliefs can become invisible prisons, limiting your decisions, actions, and even your potential. The fatal error here is to believe that what worked in the past will continue to work forever. Life is dynamic, and what made sense in a specific context may become completely irrelevant in another. The problem is that many cling to these beliefs for fear of appearing inconsistent or weak. But in reality, it is the ability to evolve that demonstrates true strength. Marcus Aurelius practiced a fundamental exercise, the constant review of one's own beliefs. He questioned his own thoughts, analyzed his judgments, and challenged himself to see the world clearly. This continuous process of self-evaluation allowed him to free himself from the weight of outdated ideas and open himself to new learning. But how do you know if an old belief is harming you? There's a simple test. Whenever you find yourself justifying something with phrases like, "It's always been this way," or "It's what I've believed for years," question that root. Ask yourself, does this belief still make sense for who I am today? Is it helping me evolve, or is it just keeping me comfortable in stagnation? Stoicism reminds us that true wisdom is being willing to let go of that which no longer holds. Not on a whim, but out of a genuine commitment to personal growth. The biggest mistake anyone can make is holding on to an idea out of fear of appearing unstable or inconsistent. True consistency lies in being honest with yourself and being willing to change when necessary. When you let go of these old, inflexible beliefs, what's left is a lighter, more open and more adaptable mind. A mind prepared to face the world as it is, not as you believed it should be. And this doesn't need to be announced or shared with anyone. It's an internal process that only you need to understand. Quietly letting go of these beliefs is an act of intellectual courage. It's admitting that you don't know everything, but that you're willing to learn and evolve. It's letting go of comfortable certainty to embrace the truth that really makes sense. Now let's talk about one of the most insidious and disguised habits we have: procrastination that hides behind excessive planning. Procrastination doesn't always look like laziness or lack of willpower. In fact, one of the most insidious forms of procrastination is the one that disguises itself as meticulous planning. You convince yourself that you're preparing, organizing, thinking about every detail to avoid future mistakes. But in practice, this becomes an endless cycle of preparation without action. The problem here is not planning itself, but using it as an excuse not to act. Stoicism teaches that it is essential to distinguish between what you control and what you do not control. Planning is useful, yes, but only to the extent that it actually serves as a guide to action. From the moment that planning becomes a substitute for action, it becomes a mental prison. Epictetus said that, "It is not enough to want to do good, one must act." And acting means facing reality, even if it is not completely under your control. Perfect plans are illusions, because the real world is unpredictable. If you only decide to act when all the conditions are perfect, then you will never actually. This disguised form of procrastination is often fueled by fear. Fear of making mistakes, of being judged, of not being prepared enough. But ironically, the real mistake is precisely that of never trying. The search for absolute security is one of the greatest enemies of progress. Want to find out if you're falling into this trap? Notice if you constantly put off starting projects because you need to plan more. Notice if you spend more time preparing lists, outlines, and roadmaps than putting those ideas into action. If this sounds familiar, it's a clear sign that you're stuck in perpetual planning. The Stoic solution. Simple. Accept that planning is useful, but only up to a point. Once you're clear about your goal and the initial steps needed, start taking action. Even if the circumstances aren't perfect, even if the outcome isn't exactly what you imagined, cutting out over-planning is a silent but liberating process. It's recognizing that you don't have to shout to the world that you're ready. It's simply about starting to do what needs to be done, without any more excuses. When you adopt this mindset, you'll realize that real progress doesn't come from impeccable planning, but from consistent action, adjusted by daily learning. And by letting go of this disguised form of procrastination, you finally make room for true progress. Now let's address another aspect that silently erodes your growth. The guilt for the past that you continue to carry like a burden. Guilt for the past is one of the heaviest and most useless weights anyone can carry. It's like trying to walk while constantly looking back, stumbling in the present because you can't take your eyes off what's already happened. Although learning from mistakes is essential, remaining stuck in them is a form of torture that no one deserves to experience. Stoicism teaches that what has already happened is beyond our control. It's impossible to change the past, and dedicating energy to trying to correct it is wasting the present. Seneca said that, "To err is human, to persist in error is foolishness, but to live trapped in it is self-sabotage." True wisdom lies in learning, accepting, and moving forward. Often, what keeps us trapped in guilt is the illusion that continuing to punish ourselves will somehow correct the mistake we made. But the truth is that beating yourself up doesn't change the past. It only prevents you from moving forward into the future. It's like trying to pay off a debt by burning your own money. And how do you know if you're still haunted by guilt about the past? Just watch to see if you constantly remember the same mistakes, belittle yourself for them, and use them as an excuse to not allow yourself to progress. This vicious cycle serves no useful purpose. The Stoics propose that, instead of endlessly regretting a mistake, you should ask yourself what you can learn from it and apply that learning to live better now. It's about transforming guilt into wisdom and pain into growth. And how do you eliminate this guilt silently? First, by acknowledging that it exists and accepting what happened. Then, by bringing your attention to the present and what you can do from now on. When you decide to act with virtue and clarity from now on, the past loses its ability to hold you back. This process doesn't need to be shared with the world. Instead, it's a deeply personal act. It's the kind of change that doesn't require announcements or external validation. It's simply deciding that you're no longer a prisoner of what you've been through. Letting go of guilt is an act of self-compassion and self-respect. It's understanding that making mistakes is part of the human process, but that insisting on punishing yourself for them is a waste of life. And when you finally let go of this weight, something magical happens. Your mind becomes lighter, more open, and prepared to live fully in the present. Because it's only in the present that you truly have the power to act and transform your reality. Throughout this journey, we, Explore a series of silent weights that, without realizing it, we accumulate in our lives. Each of these burdens, be it the need to be understood by everyone, the weariness of the uncontrollable toxic relationships, inflexible beliefs, disguised procrastination, or guilt about the past, prevents us from living with clarity and purpose. The most interesting thing about this reflection is that, often, the solution to these problems is not in shouting to the world about our changes or in making grand public statements. True transformation happens silently and subtly when we decide to eliminate these burdens from the inside out, without needing validation or explanations. Strategic silence is a powerful tool. It is not just the absence of sound, but the absence of unnecessary explanations, excessive justifications, and useless attempts to change what cannot be changed. It allows you to focus on what really matters and free yourself from the distractions that weigh on your mind and heart. When you begin to free yourself from these internal burdens, something wonderful happens. You become more present, more aware, and more aligned with what is truly important in your life. The people around you begin to notice your inner peace, because it does not depend on their approval, but on your own acceptance of who you are. Stoicism teaches us that the key to a full life is not in controlling everything around us, but in learning to control our reactions and choices. Each of the steps we discuss here is a way to cut, with wisdom and serenity, that which no longer serves our growth. And in doing so, you become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of living your life authentically and truthfully. So next time you feel tempted to carry unnecessary weight, whether it's the need to be understood, guilt about the past, or an obsession with perfect planning, remember that true freedom comes from strategic silence. It's in this silence that you find your strength, and it's in this silence that you come to terms with who you truly are, without the need to prove anything to anyone. Remove the weights from your life, one by one, and watch as your path becomes lighter, clearer, and more aligned with your true essence. In doing so, you not only free yourself from unnecessary burdens, but you also make room for true peace and genuine growth. Silence is often the answer, and in its simplicity, it is the key to transformation.